causal body. You are that Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. If you get totally caught up, it's like, getting totally caught up in this one physical body and trying to understand each cell and how it, interacts with others. But what is the point? The point is, what Vedas are talking about is you are free from this body. So therefore, the whole, if you really understand what Vedanta is talking, you don't get carried away by what are the causes, what karmas I must have done, and try to decipher all of that and try to understand in detail, because it is infinite. You'll never be able to understand. The only way is to understand, yes, there are cause and effect relationships, but who am I? I'm not even the karma which is going to give me infinite bodies. I am that awareness. That is the only way to get out of that whole thing. Otherwise, you stay within that model and that is infinite. You can't fathom the whole thing. So the purpose that we have is not to get carried away with that. It is actually to solve that equations. Okay? So therefore, if I understand that there are some past causes which gives me the body that I want, and every situation that comes in my life are due to some past causes, I need not know exactly what are the situations which caused this particular thing. I can understand that once that cause and effect relationship works, then if I change the way I look at the situation, and if I behave differently, then what? The outcomes will be different. Once I understand that, that's enough. I don't need to know all the different details. Otherwise, I get caught in what? Jumble of information, which doesn't actually give me any wisdom. It is like, the scientist. There are two types of scientists. One scientist is going on in detail and detail and detail and detail of everything, and then finding out something more. The other scientist is what? Understanding the global picture, which creates a whole different paradigm shift. One is a mind which is getting drowned in the detail. The other one is what? Sees the whole picture and understands conceptually what is happening. And for Vedanta, you need both. You need details and you need to understand the global. Otherwise, so many Vedantians get caught in all these details and there is no end to that information. And they miss the whole big purpose. Because the purpose of Upanishad is not to give you details about your karma and where they are stored and what happens and which is the mechanism and what happens after the death. It's not talking about that. It only talks about all this will continue until the time that you know your true nature. Okay, so that is what we call Brahma Vidya. The second part is Yoga Shastra. Yoga Shastra is, this equation is not something that I can just solve like that. I need to be prepared for it. This is something which is, Lord Krishna says, this knowledge remains, it's what we says, Rajavidya Rajagurya. Every secret is a secret till the time that you reveal it. Right? This secret is, even if the teacher goes on revealing it, if the student is not ready, it remains a secret. So that means the final card of what you understand, how much you understand, whether you understand it correctly or you have an illusion of understanding, all that remains in whose hand? The same laws, Ishvara. So therefore, nobody can fool Ishvara. Nobody is smart enough to fool Ishvara. So that means the only way to understand this equation is what? Understand that every capacity that is given to me is within this Ishvara. The whole equation and the possibility of solving, where does it come from? Where is that source of knowledge? No human being creates any knowledge. You must understand that. Okay? Way before Einstein discovered that time and space is relative. Time and space was relative or not? It was relative. Humanity believed that time and space is absolute. Whole Newtonian physics is what? Based on this understanding. But what is the reality? The reality was that time and space was relative. Did Einstein create this reality? No. What did he do? He discovered that fact. That fact already was. What did he do? How did he discover the fact? By removing what is ignorance. That ignorance which made not only him but everybody else believe that time and space was relative because of his preparation. What happened? After years of physics, it's not like he just kind of was sat under a tree and one day it just kind of drawn. He spent his life thinking about things. And as a result of that preparation, what happened? That reality which was already there, what? The ignorance of that reality was removed from his buddhi. Now, having understood that, do you think that everybody, all the other scientists just believed whatever Einstein one day people were saying time and space is absolute. Next day Einstein says, no, it is relative. So everybody says, yes, Mr. Einstein, whatever you say, we agree. Did that happen? No. He had to stand in front of the entire scientific community and he had to prove that how what he was saying is more right than what the humanity has been believing. How did he show? How did he show? People who are sitting around you and me who don't understand anything about physics to all those scientists who also have very rigorous thinking. He exposed his theories and he showed how what he had discovered was non-contradictory. Okay. And then whatever other way of looking at it is what? Not something which can, that there are flaws in that logic. You have to do both things. You have to say what I'm saying is flawless. But if you take another standpoint which is counter to that one, then it will fall apart logically somewhere. You have to do both. This is the whole process of proving anything. You postulate, if it is not like this, let's assume it's not like this, then where do you fall apart? Where your logic falls apart. That is a rigorous process of thinking. Now, the rishis did exactly the same. They discovered this reality and they said that we are not the creators of this reality. This reality that all that is here is one. There is an inherent equation between an individual and the cosmic universe. Is something which I expose and I give all the possible arguments to show how it is non-contradictory. And not only I show that it is non-contradictable, but I say, okay, let's assume that I'm not that, and then what are the logical flaws? So this is how the whole teaching tradition has evolved. The teaching tradition is such that it is not making just a loose statement, just random statement, you are the whole, you are one with Ishvara. It is extremely rigorous. Every statement, if you have noticed, when I make that statement, it is substantiated with what? Reasoning, arguments. Because the whole teaching tradition is like that. It's rigorous. You don't just make statements and get away with it. But in order to follow all these arguments, your buddhi has to be subtle. Otherwise, it seems like, oh my God, this is just too much. So therefore, to make your buddhi subtle, your buddhi to examine things and able to figure out things, you need preparation. Just as the equation, I want to solve Einstein's equation and I have relatively good buddhi. But do you think that I can just understand what the physicist understands tomorrow? No. I need to go through what discipline of physics for a number of years before I can understand all the intricacies. In order to solve this equation, your mind needs to go through that subtlety. What is that subtlety that the mind has to go through? In simple things, we are all confused. We are not able to assess situations accurately and to come up with the right answer of what should I do. A little overwhelming situation happens to me and I get angry, I get into grief. So what is the nature of my mind? Or that the verse is, oh, I'm spiritual, so therefore what? I should be immune to all this, so you completely block yourself off. That is another huge problem. And that is more dangerous. Because you think you are evolving, but actually there is what they call, in psychology, it is called a huge problem of dissociation. Dissociation means, you have tools now. You listen to Vedanta and you say, oh, Jagat is mithya. So therefore, I should be indifferent. All these therefores that you have created, they are all your wrong understandings. And this is how you move further and further from reality. What Vedanta says is, hey, if you really want to understand this equation, you have to learn to what? Make your buddhi subtle and refined. How? The starting point is you need to understand the presence of Ishvara. You can't say the world is mithya, therefore forget it. The presence of Ishvara in terms of all the different laws that govern the universe. The intelligence, when you see it from the standpoint of what? How the physical planets are put together, you give it a name. What is the name? Physics. The intelligence which makes the plant here, standing here, get the energy from the sun through the process of photosynthesis is what? Ishvara. I give it a name. What is the name? Biology. The intelligence which puts together billions of cells in my body, which enables it to do these multiple functions. When I see it from that standpoint, what do I call it? Physiology, anatomy. The same intelligence when I see it from the standpoint of my emotions and emotions of others. You go and see a psychologist, by the time you tell your story, the psychologist knows very well what is going on. Because he has seen so many others and there are similar patterns. If you have gone through this is how you will feel. That intelligence in form of psychology. you have two other critical orders. Order of dharma and the order of karma. The same intelligence which gives every human being an understanding of what is right and what is wrong. That is what we call dharma. And if I choose my actions which are going against dharma, then there are consequences. Whether I want it or not, there are consequences. That is what we call dharma. If I am intelligent and if I want to prepare myself for this big equation, to solve that big equation, what is the first condition that I must do? Understand the nature of the universe and what? Align myself to what? All these different laws. I can't afford to say I don't care about laws, the world is mithya, I don't care about laws of gravity. I will say, okay, you don't care, you go and you jump. What will happen? Laws of gravity are going to work on you whether you believe in them or not. So the smart thing to do is to align yourself to first recognize the presence of Ishvara as all these different laws which govern the universe, and then align your life. When you do that, what will happen? Will you try to bypass the laws of psychology? Will you? No. You will understand the laws of psychology and you will align. If you have anger, if you have a sense of sadness, there are some causes. You will look into the causes and you will take care of them. That is what we call human growth. Helping yourself. Otherwise, what happens is, you just kind of say, oh Ishvara, Ishvara, Ishvara. You don't even know what it means to relate to Ishvara. This is what Bhagavad Gita says is bhakti. Bhakti doesn't mean that you are just sitting and chanting and doing bhajans and all that. Bhakti means you are bringing to your understanding the presence of that invariable presence of that intelligence which is manifesting in so many different ways, and then you are aligning your life to all these different laws. This is how you prepare for this knowledge. If there is law of dharma, that means psychology, what does it mean? That if I have those emotions, I can't say, oh, I am that awareness which is free from those emotions, and then I just repeat like a parrot, oh, I'm free, I'm free, I'm free. What does Lord Krishna say? You need to understand laws of psychology, and within those laws of psychology, you help yourself and free yourself relatively from all these afflictions that you have. What are the afflictions? Anger, envy, sadness, fear, greed. So you need to help yourself. You need to look into it. You need to look into what is causing it, where are the distortions, and then what? Correct those distortions. Because unless you correct, there is no foundation for that big picture to be clear. If one has difficulty in just operating from whatever this is what Bhagavad Gita is saying, that the general way we engage in the world is for our raga and dvesha. I go for what I like, and I try to avoid what I dislike. And in going for what I like, sometimes I lose sight of dharma. Because what I like becomes so important, I don't consider enough what are the repercussions of my actions. So what it says is, you need to incorporate dharma in decision. This is what we call bhakti. Why? Because you have taken into account in your actions what? The intelligence which exists in form of what? Ishvara in form of dharma. And you are aligning your life to that. This is bhakti. This is Bhagavad Gita definition of bhakti. Because until all these different alignments take place, Brahma Vidya will remain a secret. Because nobody's life is totally aligned. When you come to Vedanta, everybody is totally free from all different emotional afflictions. Everybody is totally free from, does one have a total and 100% understanding of what is dharma. Then when things don't happen your way, we have a habit of what? Blaming ourselves, blaming the world. All these different distortions we have. Until we undo all these distortions, this knowledge will remain the secret. So bhakti, according to Bhagavad Gita and according to Upanishads talk about preparation. They use a different language. Dharmam chara, satyam vada. All these amazing the different, and then it says, if you are at times confused about what is the right action, what is the wrong action, go to a wise person. All these things are given. In Bhagavad Gita, it talks about align your life to Ishvara, which is in form of all these different blocks. Both are talking about Brahma Vidya and Yoga Shastra. Yoga Shastra is one's preparation. So therefore, every point, the law of karma will enable you to what? It's a kind of a, yesterday there was a very, it was a very simple, there is an organization called Indus, and they, the talker, the person who gave a talk, she was a very sweet lady, and she just gave very small practical tips to how to first detect our distortions and how to work on it. Okay. So there was no big thing of Ishvara or whatever, but she just gave some simple techniques. Simple techniques were fun. It was quite interesting. She says that let's say if you have fear, then what do you do? If you keep on saying, oh, I have fear, and I have fear, and I have to get rid of fear, but how do you then get fear? How do you get rid of fear? So she says simple technique. Find out what is opposite of fear. What is opposite of fear?
Courage.
Courage. Right? And where does courage come from?
Facing fear. Facing you, trying to move.
Facing, exactly, instead of retrieving, you face and things like that. So she says, instead of trying to get rid of fear, you start cultivating courage. And how do you cultivate courage? She says you don't have to have this big goals, right? She says every time, let's say that you have fear, the fear manifests sometimes as, oh, you can't just go out alone, you always need a company. So start going out for 5 minutes. Then next day you increase it to 10 minutes. Right? Or that you have fear of being alone. Then you just say, okay, now 5 minutes, So he said, actually start acting and gathering courage. Small things. And he says, the experience of that courage, that you are able to cross all these self-defined boundaries. will give you so much confidence that over a period of time, the weight of that courage will become more than the fears. And then it will become what? Easier and easier. Then you actually begin to experience how much freedom there is in the courage. And then you want to act more and more according to that. And you slowly, very naturally get rid of this fear. She gave another example which was very interesting. It was it's very sweet talk. She says, let's say you have a problem of envy. That you feel, that somebody is really well and you feel small and you feel jealous and all that. So he says, how do you correct that? So she said that actually somebody's well-being is invoking what? Discomfort in you. So you have to begin to feel good when something is good. Right? The opposite. When somebody or something is good, you have to, instead of feeling small, you have to feel good. Then there is no jealousy. If something is good and I feel good about it, is there a jealousy? There is no jealousy. So she says, how do you cultivate that? She says, with reference to people, it may be difficult. So you start with plants. When plants are beautiful, it doesn't evoke smallness in you. So every day you exercise and you tell that, oh, the plants are beautiful and I'm feeling so happy because of that. The sun is beautiful. You start noticing and you start rejoicing in goodness. He says, over a period of time, you begin to enjoy that thing, that some good thing doesn't evoke smallness in you, it evokes what? Joy, and that makes you feel so good. So then you slowly move to individuals. And this is how every distortion of ours, Vedanta cannot be an escape, because Vedanta says the world is mithya, it cannot be used as an escape to undo all these distortions that exist in our mind. Because a mind which is fraught with distortions Ishvara will not reveal that reality accurately to that person. This is the law. You can't bypass laws. You need to align. Without that alignment, there is no foundation on which the knowledge can stay. And entire practice of Yoga Shastra is creating that foundation. And for that foundation, you need to understand how Ishvara pervades the universe, and you need to correct every disorder. And that requires effort, and it's not going to happen automatically. Okay? And that whole process, according to Bhagavad Gita, is bhakti. So that means you need to redefine what you mean by bhakti. For us, unfortunately, bhakti is confined to what it is. It is a whole different way of what? Understanding, because bhakti means relating to Ishvara. And Ishvara is in form of everything, all the laws. And aligning yourself to all the laws and helping yourself to let go the distortions and making a serving recipient of the knowledge is what we call bhakti. There is no Vedanta without, our teacher used to say, without being. But not the traditional bhakta that we think. It's a much larger definition, and really transforming yourself. No, anytime, whether you are distorted in your thinking or not, how do you recognize?
Inner voice.
Huh?
Inner voice is
No, you feel that you are not comfortable.
Exactly.
Always not.
That mechanism is there. You may choose to ignore it, but that mechanism is there, which is part of that intelligence.
It is consciousness.
Yeah. That is something which is constantly talking to you about the nature of your interaction with the universe. We may choose to shut it out, but it is there. Learn to listen to it. And this is why this whole prayer that we do in the morning, Bhurvuvaswaha Tat Saviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yonaha Prachodayat. What? Light up my mind so that it is freed from what? Confusion, error, wrong thinking, ignorance. Every day starts with that prayer because human buddhi is so fragile and it can go on a tangent, and once it goes on a tangent we can have thousands of reasons to let it go, and that only creates misery for us and for others. So that means this is what we call bhakti. Bhakti is a very, very potent thing, and in order to be a real bhakta, it requires a lot of maturity. Okay? And therefore, in this verse, he says, how did you know that you have grown enough? One of the indications is nirvairaha sarvabhuteshu. So much of our life is lived with all certain implicit assumptions. You know, when I say I am a victim, or that I feel that I am a failure, or something is wrong, you know, there is some lack, some inadequacy, there is always some resentment, and the resentment doesn't stay as an abstract concept. Resentment is always towards what? Some people. Certain events happen, but the events don't happen without people. There are people involved in those events, and those events give you pain. So where are you carrying that? Are you carrying that pain with reference to the events or with reference to the people? With reference to the people who are part of those events. So that means every situation which did not happen your way, okay, you carry the weight of that situation, not in form of the situation, but in terms of what? People who are connected to those situations and those events. So that means your mind is carrying what? People. And your disappointment, or your sadness, or your anger, and everything is directed towards people. When you have worked on yourself enough, what is the indication? Nirvairaha sarvabhuteshu. All the people that you are carrying within yourself in form of resentment, frustration, anger, all those accounts are settled.
If you blame yourself, would you have resentment against yourself?
Yes. And therefore, sarvabhuteshu also includes yourself. See, generally we think sarvabhuteshu includes only others. But sarvabhuteshu also includes yourself. So that means any resentment that you have towards yourself. Why did I not do that? Right? But that I'm a failure, I didn't live my life. All that also has to be free. This is a huge work. Huge. Imagine that you have a mind which is free. It is not holding on to anything, not either in terms of people or in terms of these general opinions, which are generalized opinions about world is unfair. World is unfair means what? People don't act fairly, right? We make the statement world is unfair, but there is no entity called world independent of people.
Sometimes we blame nature and God has done this to me. So
Exactly.
if there's a situation,
So, yeah, because I don't understand. So therefore, all the resentment that I carry towards people, I have to free myself of. And how can I free myself of the resentment towards people? So I really, many people feel, oh, I've been wrong. Somebody has been really bad to me. Right? How do you free yourself of that?
Clearing it out in that person.
Okay, one possibility, this is very good. Now let's explore possibilities. There is no one way of doing it.
Forgiveness.
One is, as Preeti says, you clear it out with the other person. One of the things that we don't do enough in this world is communicate. We don't really communicate our real feelings and our real thoughts. Because what happens is, at times, what happens, I feel, oh my God, if I tell this, the person may get angry.
What will be their reaction?
The person may react. So our whole commitment is to not let it be. Right? But the minute I say let it be, means I have not used my free will to resolve that situation. When I let it be, do you think it is really, I forget?
No.
It remains with you and it really, and then it builds up. And when it builds up, what happens? One day, you blow up, you explode.
My wife's word, never mind.
How could we miss at least one?
There is no word for it. Like namonomics or namo.
So, here, as Preeti says, okay, it may lead to confrontation, but that is just my imagination. I'm just thinking.
It can even lead to your health getting spoiled.
Yeah, exactly. So many of these present day illnesses are all what?
Unresolved issues.
Unresolved
Very
issues. I have a group of, I think I told you in this class, I have my uncle is a founder of Department of Psychiatry in Bombay. His name is Dr. Raya. And his son is also a psychiatrist and his son is also a psychiatrist. So 3 generations of psychiatrists. And we met him in a party and we said, now how have you seen the psychiatry evolving in India and all over the world? And he says that when we asked that middle, right? So he says when my father was practicing psychiatry, people thought that only crazy people go to psychologists and psychiatrists. And they are like mad and and he says now when my son is practicing, they said how much everything that you feel, everything that you think, your head, every parameter of your being is connected with your psychology. Unresolved issues won't disappear. Whether you come to Vedanta or you go to anything, they will not disappear. They need your attention. And they need for you to what? You need to recognize and you need to work on it. Okay? So therefore, the community, that how do you settle account with people? How do you not carry people in your mind? Engage in conversation. Even if it is unpleasant, your commitment, please remind yourself, your commitment is to the truth. Your commitment is not to hush-push things just for the peace, the so-called imagined peace, which is a very short term and a non-existent peace. But when you communicate, how you communicate is also up to you. Generally when we communicate, what is our tendency? You're like that, you did this to me, and you're like really, and this is how we just start blaming the other person. Do you think the other person is just going to sit and listen to you and say, yes, you're wrong? What? Either switch off or start blaming you in return.
It's like you're attacking someone.
You're attacking somebody, right? So therefore, you try to learn, because there is no other way. You first tell yourself that I cannot but communicate. Secondly, but I can choose to communicate in a what? more
Compassion.
exactly. A way where you state what you feel. Instead of saying you are bad, you did this to me, you can say I feel hurt and I feel sad. Because this is how I understood. Then what happens? You also give the other person an opportunity to what?
Explain.
Explain. This is how you engage in a dialogue. That dialoguing when you express what you have to say and you also equally openly listen to what other person is saying is where you begin to resolve conflict. And that courage, that you have to gather that courage. Because we all have the tendency of forget it, or it will be too uncomfortable. But we have to learn to cultivate it. Okay? That is only one of the ways. What are the other ways of not keeping human beings in your mind? There are so many people who have gone, towards whom you carry, let's say, resentment. You can't call a person who has already departed and say, now I want to talk to you. What will you do? Forgive. How do you forgive?
You let it bother you. You don't, maybe you can't forget sometimes, but you don't hold it with you, gradually.
Somehow.
You say, good, he's dead. I'm rid of him.
That's about it.
Say for someone who cheated you, he's gone.
He's gone. Exactly. What do you
How do you handle this?
How do you handle it?
Faster.
See, unfortunately,
Maybe you
this
have
is-
cheated somebody in your previous life.
Okay.
That's why you have
Yeah,
always
yeah,
That's true.
He settled like a karma.
I think one way to that money was your I think one way to do it is to always look at what you attracted that brought that on. Because then the onus comes on to you. And most things are a reflection of what you have kind of, you desired something, or you were foolish in some way, or you done that.
Yeah, one very good way of doing. See, what Namita is saying is very right, that we often blame others and we don't actually enough look at our responsibility in the situation, right? So this is also a very nice way of, you feel this person did wrong, but then the other side of it is, what could I have done to attract that behavior? That's a nice discipline. Because we generally always think the other is to be blamed and I am the right one, right? But if we carry it too far, what happens is you always feel that you are responsible for everything. Sometimes the problem belongs to somebody else and you take it on as your own problem. And that is also not required at times. I'll give you a very, in psychology, this is something which happens to almost every human being, which is a misplaced responsibility. Where, let's say, as a child sees parents fighting. The child has got nothing to do with this fight. But the child somehow, in the vision of child, my parents are infallible, my parents are like gods. So now something is not in place, I must be responsible for it. So this is where we say we take on responsibility which does not belong to us. This is again a distortion. When I overtake responsibilities for situations for which I am not responsible, then also, right, I get into all the time somebody else is doing something and I blame myself, where I will not take enough actions to help myself. Even this karma model, it's sometimes very dangerous. You say, oh, it must be my karma, therefore I am going through this difficulty. You don't make enough effort to
Get up.
yeah. So dealing and keeping people out is very easy to say, but not so easy to do. And to do it really rationally and carefully. It requires a lot of sophistication where I do all of that, but don't get totally carried away in one framework or the other to the extent that it becomes another distortion. Neither I take no responsibility nor I take all responsibility.
I see lots of parents getting that into with their children. Anything goes wrong with the child and they blame and say, oh, maybe I
No.
did. You know, not knowing that a grown child has got his own karma, he's
Exactly.
got his own deeds,
Absolutely.
he's 30, he's working,
Yes.
he's not doing, it's
Yes.
not mine. But they go through so much
So much
misery
pain.
because
Yes.
of that.
Yes.
There's just no
Yes.
way they can.
Yes.
But everybody said that in my notice you can't.
But everybody, that's why though you're here, because you're not everybody. You should not get affected.
Everything is blamed on the mother. The child does something wrong. it's
I
blamed.
will stop now. Just
That sounds familiar, right?
so think about your homework. Think about different ways in which you can have healthy relationships and don't carry people in your mind, carry people in form of resentments in your mind. What are the different ways, right? And be a little bit subtle because there is no, every rule that you have will have the flip side. So how to have that balanced view?
The whole thing is
But
balance.
in which all areas? One is communication, one is looking at oneself, what are the areas? You deconstruct ideas, only then you change. Because otherwise it becomes very easy to say, oh, don't carry, forgive people, let it be. But that doesn't change anything.
Yeah, and somewhere along the way, I think so many things build up. Then there's so many
Exactly.
areas that you feel forgive, let go, but
But it doesn't happen.
it somehow bursts into an unwanted,
Exactly.
it's like a water
Attitudes.
stream.
Yes.
It trickles, and at some point it just comes out in which you not
Absolutely.
anticipate.
Absolutely. That's why you need to stay with it. All these ideas, this is why Bhagavad Gita is not a book of advice. I'm not sitting here and telling you, oh, forgive people, oh, don't keep them in mind. No. The whole trick of Bhagavad Gita is what is understand human mind and delicately work with it to undo all these distortions. This is an intricate process. And you have to be compassionate to yourself and you need to be compassionate to others and you also need to incorporate the reality of Ishvara in that whole equation.
Understanding.
But what are the different
Incorporate it.
things? Yeah. All these things we will talk about in detail next time.
The next is Thursday again.
Yeah, back to